The bartender kicks the black girl out of the saloon. He doesn't know her husband owns it. "Get out before I throw you out!" the giant cowboy bellows, shoving the quiet woman toward the swinging doors as laughter erupts from the crowd. The trembling girl clutches her leather satchel while townspeople sneer and whisper cruel judgments. They see another lost soul destined to vanish into the unforgiving frontier, crushed beneath boots of those who decide who belongs. But the soft-spoken businessman arriving by stagecoach carries secrets that will shatter their assumptions. His union with the dismissed woman represents more than marriage. It's a calculated rebellion against the corrupt forces strangling this dying town. Their hidden purpose threatens powerful men who've grown rich on others' misery, and discovery could cost them everything they've worked to build. Will the woman reclaim her dignity and expose the truth, or will prejudice bury their mission forever? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. Evelyn Hawke stepped off the dusty stagecoach into Cedar Ridge with her worn leather satchel clutched tight. The frontier town sprawled before her like a wounded animal, its weathered buildings leaning against each other for support. She had been watching this place for 3 days now, studying its rhythms and secrets from the shadows. The Hopewell Saloon dominated the main street, its paint peeling and windows clouded with grime. Men stumbled in and out at all hours, while women in faded dresses watched from upstairs windows. Evelyn noted every detail, every face, every transaction that seemed too quick or too quiet. Buck Morrison emerged from the saloon, his massive frame filling the doorway. He spotted Evelyn across the street and his eyes narrowed. She had seen that look before in a dozen other towns, the look that said she didn't belong. Evelyn crossed the street with measured steps. Her simple brown dress and modest bonnet drew stares from passers-by. Whispers followed in her wake like dust kicked up by wagon wheels. Buck planted himself in front of the saloon entrance, his arms crossed over his barrel chest. "We don't serve your kind here." The words hit the air like a gunshot. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. A crowd began to gather. Evelyn reached into her satchel and pulled out a small notebook. She flipped it open and began writing. Buck's face reddened. "You deaf?" "I said move along." "I heard you clearly." Evelyn continued writing without looking up. Buck stepped forward. His shadow fell across her notebook. "Then you'll move before I make you move." A woman appeared at an upstairs window. Ruby Chen had been cleaning rooms when the commotion started. She watched the scene unfold with growing unease. Something about the woman below didn't fit. Her posture spoke of education. Her satchel looked expensive despite its worn appearance. Mayor Webb rounded the corner, drawn by the crowd. His polished boots and pressed suit stood out among the rough frontier clothes. He moved through the gathering people with practiced political grace. "What seems to be the trouble here?" Webb's voice carried false concern. Buck jerked his thumb toward Evelyn. "This one won't move along." Webb studied Evelyn with calculating eyes. She met his gaze without flinching. Something passed between them, a recognition of intelligence meeting intelligence. "Ma'am, perhaps you're lost. Cedar Ridge can be confusing for visitors." "I'm exactly where I need to be." Evelyn closed her notebook and returned it to her satchel. Webb's smile never wavered, but his eyes hardened. "Well, Buck here runs a respectable establishment. He has the right to serve whoever he chooses." The crowd murmured agreement. A few men nodded their heads. Buck's chest swelled with borrowed authority. "Get out before I throw you out." Buck's voice boomed across the street. He grabbed Evelyn's arm and shoved her toward the edge of the wooden walkway. She stumbled but kept her footing. The crowd laughed and applauded. Someone called out encouragement to Buck. Evelyn straightened her dress and adjusted her bonnet. Her dignity remained intact despite the public humiliation. She looked up at Ruby, who quickly stepped back from the window. Webb approached Buck and spoke in low tones. Evelyn caught fragments of their conversation. Something about keeping things quiet. Something about important visitors arriving soon. Buck nodded eagerly at whatever Webb was telling him. The mayor patted his shoulder like a man rewarding a faithful dog. Evelyn walked away without another word. She found a bench outside the general store and sat down. From there, she could observe the saloon while appearing to rest. Ruby appeared in the doorway of the general store 20 minutes later. She glanced around nervously before approaching Evelyn's bench. "You shouldn't have done that." Ruby kept her voice low. "Buck doesn't take kindly to being challenged." "I noticed." Evelyn studied Ruby's face. Mixed heritage, probably Chinese and Irish. Old enough to know the weight of prejudice, but young enough to still hope for change. "Why did you really come here? That wasn't about wanting a drink." Evelyn opened her satchel and showed Ruby the notebook, page after page of observations, measurements, and carefully documented irregularities. "I'm waiting for my husband. He should arrive on tomorrow's stage." Ruby's eyes widened. "Your husband?" "Levi Hawk. Perhaps you've heard the name?" Ruby shook her head, but something in her expression suggested the name meant something to someone in town. "He's been buying businesses, struggling ones. Places where the books don't quite add up." The color drained from Ruby's face. "You're not just passing through. No, we're here to stay." A stagecoach appeared on the horizon, earlier than expected. Ruby followed Evelyn's gaze and saw the dust cloud growing larger. That might be him now. Evelyn stood and brushed dust from her dress. Ruby grabbed her arm. "Wait, there are things you need to know about this town, about Mayor Webb, about why some businesses are struggling while others prosper." Evelyn turned back to face her. "Then you'd better tell me quickly." The stagecoach rolled closer, bringing with it the next chapter of Cedar Ridge's story. The stagecoach pulled to a stop in front of the hotel. Dust settled as a well-dressed man stepped down, his polished boots hitting the wooden walkway with authority. Levi Hawk surveyed the town with the practiced eye of a businessman who had rebuilt failing communities before. Evelyn approached him with measured steps. Their embrace was brief but warm, drawing curious stares from onlookers who had witnessed her earlier humiliation. Buck emerged from the saloon, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the street. He squinted at the reunion, confusion spreading across his weathered features. Levi took Evelyn's arm, and they walked directly toward the Hopewell Saloon. The crowd from earlier began to reassemble, sensing another confrontation brewing. Buck positioned himself in the doorway again, his arms crossed in the same defensive posture he had used hours before. "I told your woman already. We don't serve her kind." Levi stopped 3 feet from Buck and looked up at the larger man without flinching. "This is my wife, Evelyn Hawk. I'm Levi Hawk." Buck's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "Your wife?" "My wife and business partner." The crowd pressed closer. Ruby appeared at the upstairs window again, her face tight with concern. Buck shook his head slowly. "Don't matter who you married, mister. Rules are rules." Levi reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a folded document. He handed it to Buck, who stared at the paper like it might bite him. "That's the deed to this establishment. I purchased it 6 months ago." Buck's face went white. His hands trembled as he unfolded the document. The legal language meant nothing to him, but the official seals and signatures looked genuine. Mayor Webb pushed through the crowd, his politician's smile firmly in place. "Gentlemen, let's discuss this like civilized people." Levi turned toward Webb with cold eyes. "Mayor Webb, I presume. Your reputation precedes you." Webb's smile faltered slightly. "All good things, I hope." "That remains to be seen." Ruby descended the stairs inside the saloon and emerged in the doorway beside Buck. She studied Levi's face, then looked at Evelyn with new understanding. "Ma'am, I apologize for what happened earlier." Ruby's voice carried genuine remorse. "If I had known," Evelyn stepped forward. "You couldn't have known, but now that you do, perhaps we can start fresh." Buck crumpled the deed in his fist. "This has to be some kind of mistake, some kind of trick." "No trick." Levi's voice remained calm. "I've been purchasing struggling businesses throughout the territory, places where the books don't balance, where honest people are being squeezed out." Webb moved closer, his eyes darting between Levi and Evelyn. "Mr. Hawk, perhaps we should discuss your business plans privately, over dinner at the hotel. I prefer transparency." Levi gestured toward the growing crowd. These people deserve to know what's been happening to their town. Buck's confusion turned to anger. You can't just waltz in here and take over. This is my place. I've worked here for 5 years. Evelyn opened her satchel and withdrew her notebook. She flipped to a page covered with neat handwriting and precise numbers. According to the previous owner's records, this establishment has been operating at a loss for 2 years. The tax assessments alone exceed the monthly revenue. Webb stepped forward quickly. Mrs. Hawk, I'm not sure you understand the complexities of frontier business. I understand perfectly. Evelyn's voice carried new authority. I'm a lawyer. The word hit the crowd like a physical blow. Conversations stopped. Eyes widened. Buck stumbled backward. Ruby stared at Evelyn with a mixture of admiration and fear. A lawyer? Graduated top of my class from the Philadelphia Law School. I've been investigating the financial irregularities in this town for the past week. Webb's composure cracked. Investigating? Evelyn flipped to another page in her notebook. The mercantile company pays twice the property tax of similar businesses in neighboring towns. The blacksmith shop was forced to close after receiving a tax bill that exceeded its annual income. The hotel faces foreclosure despite maintaining steady occupancy. Buck looked from Evelyn to Webb, understanding dawning in his eyes. You said those taxes were set by the territorial government. Webb's smile returned, but it looked forced. They are, of course. Mrs. Hawk may be educated, but she's not familiar with local regulations. Evelyn turned to face Webb directly. I prosecuted 3 territorial officials for tax fraud in Colorado last year. All 3 received prison sentences. The crowd began to murmur. Ruby moved closer to Evelyn, as if drawn by some invisible force. Webb raised his hands in a calming gesture. Now, let's not jump to conclusions. Mrs. Hawk, you're obviously tired from your journey. Perhaps we should continue this conversation when you've had time to rest. Levi placed his hand on Evelyn's shoulder. My wife doesn't need rest. She needs answers. Buck crumpled the deed further and threw it at Levi's feet. This is insane. You people can't just show up and destroy everything. Evelyn bent down and retrieved the deed. She smoothed out the wrinkles and handed it back to Buck. We're not here to destroy anything. We're here to save it. Ruby touched Buck's arm. Maybe we should listen to what they have to say. Buck jerked his arm away. Don't tell me what to do. Webb stepped between them all. I think this has gone far enough. Mr. and Mrs. Hawk, welcome to Cedar Ridge. I'm sure we can work out any misunderstandings. Evelyn closed her notebook and returned it to her satchel. There's no misunderstanding, Mayor Webb. The only question is whether you'll cooperate with our investigation or obstruct it. The challenge hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. The crowd dispersed slowly, leaving whispered conversations in its wake. Buck retreated into the saloon while Webb disappeared toward the mayor's office with hurried steps. Evelyn and Levi stood alone on the wooden walkway, victory and danger hanging in equal measure around them. Ruby lingered near the saloon entrance, torn between loyalty to her employer and curiosity about these newcomers who promised change. She watched Evelyn organize papers with practiced efficiency, noting the confident way she handled legal documents. Levi pulled out a second set of papers from his jacket. The boarding house, the old grain storage, and the abandoned tannery, all purchased through intermediaries over the past year. Evelyn studied each deed carefully. The pattern is consistent. Every business forced to sell faced the same excessive tax burdens. Ruby approached them cautiously. You really own all those places? We're creating a cooperative model. Levi's voice carried the passion of a true believer. Shared ownership, fair wages, equal treatment for all workers regardless of background. Buck's voice boomed from inside the saloon. Ruby, get in here! Ruby hesitated, looking between the saloon and the Hawks. Something fundamental was shifting in Cedar Ridge, and she sensed her next choice would determine which side of that change she landed on. Evelyn noticed her hesitation. What is it you're afraid of? Buck's not a bad man. He just does what Mayor Webb tells him to do. We all do. Why? Levi asked the question simply, but it carried weight. Ruby glanced toward the mayor's office, then back at them. Because Webb controls the jobs, the permits, the taxes. Cross him and your business dies. Your family starves. Evelyn opened her notebook to a fresh page. Tell me about the other businesses that died. Over the next hour, Ruby painted a picture of systematic corruption. The bakery closed after Webb tripled their flour import fees. The seamstress shop shuttered when Webb declared their building unsafe, then sold it to his brother at auction. The small schoolhouse lost funding after the teacher questioned Webb's education policies. Buck emerged from the saloon as Ruby finished her account. His face showed the strain of a man whose world had tilted off its axis in a single afternoon. Mayor wants to see you both. Now. Levi and Evelyn exchanged glances. They had expected this summons. Webb's office occupied the second floor of the bank building. Heavy curtains blocked most of the afternoon light, creating shadows that seemed to move with each flicker of the oil lamps. Webb sat behind an ornate desk that looked out of place in the frontier town. Please sit. Webb gestured to two chairs positioned directly in front of his desk. I think we got off on the wrong foot earlier. Evelyn remained standing. Levi took one of the chairs but kept his posture alert. Webb opened a leather folder and spread several documents across his desk. I've been reviewing your business purchases, Mr. Hawk. Very impressive. Very ambitious. Thank you. I'm curious about your long-term plans. Cedar Ridge is a small community with specific needs and customs. Evelyn stepped forward. Customs like overcharging businesses owned by certain types of people? Webb's practiced smile never wavered. Mrs. Hawk, I understand you're passionate about justice, but frontier economics operate differently than what you might have learned in Philadelphia. Justice operates the same everywhere. Evelyn pulled out her notebook. Your tax assessments violate territorial law in 17 different ways. The smile finally cracked. That's a serious accusation. Levi leaned forward in his chair. It's not an accusation. It's a fact we can prove in court. Webb closed the folder and leaned back. Gentleman and lady, let's speak plainly. This town has survived drought, raids, and economic collapse because we maintain order. That requires making hard choices about who belongs and who doesn't. Who appointed you to make those choices? Evelyn's voice carried the authority she had learned in courtrooms back east. The people of Cedar Ridge. I've been elected 3 times. Elections require all eligible citizens to vote freely. When did you last allow everyone to participate? Webb stood up abruptly. I think this meeting is over. Ruby appeared in the doorway, her face flushed from running. Mayor Webb, there's trouble at the saloon. Buck had barricaded himself inside and was refusing to serve anyone until he got answers about his job security. 3 of Webb's regular supporters sat outside demanding their evening drinks. Webb grabbed his hat. This is your doing. Levi stood to meet him. This is the result of years of corruption finally catching up. As they walked back toward the saloon, Evelyn noticed more people than usual on the streets. Word was spreading about the confrontation, the deeds, and her legal credentials. Some faces showed curiosity, others hostility, but none showed indifference. The saloon doors remained closed. Buck's voice carried through the walls as he argued with someone inside. Webb pounded on the door. Buck, open up! We need to talk! The door opened a crack. Buck's eye appeared in the gap. Is it true what she said? About the taxes? Webb glanced at the growing crowd. We'll discuss this privately. No more private discussions. Buck's voice carried new resolve. I want answers in front of everyone. Evelyn felt the moment crystallizing around them. Buck's simple demand for transparency had turned their legal investigation into something larger. The town was choosing sides, and the battle lines were becoming clear. Webb's mask of political civility began to slip as he realized his careful control was crumbling in real time. Buck finally opened the saloon doors wide, his massive frame no longer blocking entry, but welcoming it. The crowd pushed inside, filling every available space. Oil lamps flickered as bodies pressed together, creating a courtroom atmosphere in the frontier establishment. Webb positioned himself near the bar, trying to regain control of the narrative. His politician's instincts told him to divide and conquer, but the unified attention of the crowd suggested his usual tactics might fail. Evelyn placed her satchel on a table and began removing documents. Not just her notebook this time, but official papers with territorial seals and federal stamps. The legal weight of her evidence became visible to everyone present. Ruby moved through the crowd, whispering to familiar faces. Her mixed heritage had always made her an outsider. But now that perspective gave her credibility with others who felt marginalized by Webb's policies. Buck stood behind his bar, but his posture had changed completely from earlier in the day. Instead of the aggressive enforcer, he now appeared as a man questioning everything he thought he knew about his world. "I heard Webb talking to someone from the railroad company last week." Buck's admission sent ripples through the room. They were discussing property values and development rights. Webb's face reddened. "Buck, you misunderstood a routine civic planning discussion." Evelyn looked up from her documents. "What exactly did you hear?" Buck's hands gripped the bar edge. "Something about clearing out undesirable elements before the railroad expansion, making the town more attractive to investors." The crowd stirred uneasily. Several people owned small businesses or properties that would be affected by railroad development. Levi stepped forward, his calm demeanor providing stability in the growing tension. "The railroad companies often work with local officials to acquire land cheaply, usually by making current ownership unsustainable." Webb raised his hands for silence. "These are wild conspiracy theories from outsiders who don't understand our community." Evelyn spread a large map across the table. Red marks indicated every business that had closed in the past 2 years. Blue marks showed Webb's family properties and those of his close associates. The pattern was unmistakable. The railroad route runs directly through the area where most closures occurred. Evelyn's finger traced the proposed line. Properties purchased at auction prices far below market value. Ruby gasped as she recognized the implications. "My boarding house is right in that path." Other voices joined hers as people realized their own properties fell within the targeted zone. The abstract concept of corruption suddenly became personal and immediate. Buck's voice cut through the rising chatter. "Webb told me I was protecting the town's character. Said certain people would bring down property values and drive away decent families." The words hung in the air like smoke. Everyone understood what certain people meant without Buck having to specify. Webb stepped toward the door but found his path blocked by townspeople who moments before had been his supporters. His carefully constructed political coalition was fracturing in real time. Evelyn pulled out another document, this one bearing federal government letterheads. "The Department of Interior is investigating irregular land transfers throughout the territory. Cedar Ridge has been flagged for review." "That's impossible," Webb sputtered. "No federal investigators have contacted me." "Because I am the federal investigator." Evelyn's words dropped like stones into still water. "My legal practice in Philadelphia included contract work for the Territorial Oversight Office." The revelation transformed the room's atmosphere completely. This wasn't just a local dispute between newcomers and established authority. Federal crimes were being exposed in real time. Buck slammed his fist on the bar. "You used me, made me do your dirty work while you got rich." Webb's composure cracked entirely. "You people have no idea what it takes to build a civilized community from nothing. Sometimes difficult decisions must be made." "Whose civilization?" Ruby's question carried decades of accumulated frustration. "One that only includes people who look like you." More voices joined the confrontation. The blacksmith, whose shop had been closed. The widow whose boarding house faced foreclosure. The shopkeeper whose permit applications mysteriously disappeared. Levi moved to stand beside his wife, presenting a united front. The cooperative businesses we're establishing will be owned collectively by the workers. Profits shared equally. Management decisions made democratically. Webb laughed bitterly. "Idealistic nonsense. You'll destroy this town's economy within 6 months. We'll transform it into something sustainable." Evelyn gathered her documents efficiently. "Something that serves everyone, not just a corrupt inner circle." The crowd began to shift, literally and figuratively. People moved away from Webb and closer to the Hawks. The physical rearrangement of the room reflected the political realignment taking place. Buck removed his bartender's apron and set it on the bar. "I quit working for you, Webb. All of you." Ruby nodded toward Buck with newfound respect. His simple act of defiance had required genuine courage. Webb made one final attempt to regain control. "You're all making a terrible mistake. When this cooperative experiment fails, don't come crying to me for help." Evelyn closed her satchel and looked directly at him. "Mayor Webb, you're under citizen's arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and violation of federal territory laws." The room fell silent. In that moment, everyone understood that Cedar Ridge would never be the same again. Webb backed toward the saloon doors, his eyes darting between the hostile faces surrounding him. The crowd pressed closer, but maintained enough distance to avoid any accusations of mob violence. This was justice, not vengeance. Evelyn opened her satchel one final time and withdrew a set of federal warrants. The official seals caught the lamplight, lending gravity to the moment that mere accusations could not achieve. "These warrants were issued 3 days ago based on evidence I submitted to the Territorial Oversight Office." Evelyn's voice carried the authority of federal law. "Mayor Webb, you're charged with conspiracy to defraud, abuse of public office, and violation of property rights under territorial statute." Buck stepped out from behind the bar. "I'll testify about everything he made me do, every person he told me to turn away, every business he targeted." Webb's political mask slipped completely, revealing the cornered animal beneath. "You have no idea what forces you're dealing with. The railroad company has friends in the territorial capital. Powerful friends." Ruby moved to stand beside Buck, her decision finally made. "Then they can visit you in prison." The saloon doors swung open as 2 men in federal marshal badges entered. They had been waiting outside for Evelyn's signal, ready to make the arrest official and legal. "Marshal Thompson, Marshal Davis." Evelyn nodded toward the federal officers. "Mayor Webb is ready to surrender himself to federal custody." Webb's shoulders sagged as the reality of his situation became clear. His carefully constructed empire of corruption was collapsing with the efficiency of a controlled demolition. Marshal Thompson stepped forward with practiced authority. "Mayor Webb, you're under arrest on federal charges. You have the right to legal representation at your trial." The crowd watched in respectful silence as Webb was led away. No cheering, no celebration. The gravity of federal justice demanded dignity, even when applied to those who had shown none to others. Levi addressed the room once the marshals had departed. "The cooperative structure we're proposing requires active participation from everyone. No silent partners, no passive investors." The blacksmith raised his weathered hand. "What about those of us who lost everything? How do we buy into a cooperative with empty pockets?" Evelyn had anticipated this question. "Labor equity. Your skills and time become your investment. The blacksmith shop will be rebuilt using collective resources, but you'll manage it according to your expertise." Ruby stepped onto a chair to address the crowd. "What about the saloon workers, the cleaning women, the cooks, the people Webb never considered worth protecting?" "Equal partners." Levi's answer was immediate. "The service industry requires the most skilled workers of all. Customer relations, inventory management, financial tracking. These are professional skills deserving professional compensation." Buck cleared his throat, drawing attention to himself. "I owe apologies to more people than I can count, starting with Mrs. Hawk." Evelyn met his eyes directly. "Apologies are noted and accepted, but apologies without changed behavior are just words." "Yes, ma'am, I understand that." The widow who owned the failing boarding house spoke up from the back of the room. "How do we know this cooperative idea will actually work? Sounds too good to be real." Evelyn pulled out yet another document, this one filled with financial projections and market analyses. "We've successfully established similar cooperatives in 3 other territories. Average income increased 40% within the first year." Levi added practical details. "Shared resources reduce individual overhead costs. Collective purchasing power lowers supply expenses. Democratic management prevents any single person from exploiting the others. The room buzzed with cautious optimism. People began discussing specific implementation details, asking practical questions about logistics and timelines. Ruby jumped down from her chair and approached Evelyn directly. "You planned all of this from the beginning, didn't you? The investigation, the federal warrants, even Buck's change of heart." "I planned for multiple possibilities." Evelyn's admission carried no arrogance, only thoroughness. "But people had to choose change for themselves. I couldn't force that transformation." Buck nodded slowly. "She's right. Nobody made me listen to Webb for 5 years. Nobody made me treat people badly. Those were my choices." The crowd was already reorganizing itself into working groups. The blacksmith discussed rebuilding plans with the carpenter. Ruby talked inventory management with the general store clerk. Levi moved between groups, offering guidance and answering technical questions about cooperative structure. Evelyn stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The main street looked exactly the same as it had that morning, but everything fundamental had changed. Justice had been served, but more importantly, a foundation for lasting change had been established. Marshal Thompson returned alone, his partner having escorted Webb to the territorial capital for processing. "Ma'am, the railroad company's lawyer is already demanding Webb's release. Claims the federal charges are overreach of territorial authority." Evelyn smiled grimly. "Let them make that argument in federal court. The evidence is documented according to federal standards. This case will set precedent for similar corruption throughout the territory." The marshal tipped his hat respectfully. "Yes, ma'am. The territorial governor specifically requested that you continue your investigative work in other communities facing similar problems." Inside the saloon, the working groups had evolved into a town meeting. Voices overlapped as people shared ideas, concerns, and hopes for their community's future. Buck stood at the center of it all, no longer the enforcer of exclusion, but the facilitator of inclusion. 6 months later, the autumn sun cast long shadows across a transformed Cedar Ridge. The Hopewell Saloon had been renovated into a community center, its fresh paint gleaming white with green trim. A new sign hung proudly above the entrance: Hopewell Community Center and Legal Aid. Evelyn sat behind a polished desk in what had once been the gambling corner, reviewing legal documents for 3 different cooperative businesses. Her law practice had grown beyond anything she had imagined possible in Philadelphia. Territorial residents traveled days to seek her expertise in property disputes and business formation. Buck emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of coffee for Evelyn's afternoon clients. His transformation from aggressive enforcer to community supporter had been the most dramatic of all. He wore a clean white shirt and treated every visitor with genuine respect, regardless of their background or appearance. Ruby managed the community center's daily operations from an office upstairs. The former saloon worker now oversaw meeting schedules, coordinated cooperative business activities, and maintained financial records for 5 different enterprises. Her mixed heritage, once a source of isolation, had become an asset in bridging different community groups. Levi entered through the main doors, dust on his boots from visiting the new blacksmith cooperative on the town's east side. The rebuilt shop employed 4 workers as equal partners, their shared ownership model proving more efficient than traditional wage labor. "The territorial governor wants to visit next month." Levi handed Evelyn a formal letter bearing official seals. "He's considering our cooperative model for territory-wide implementation." Evelyn scanned the letter quickly. "Governor Martinez has been following our economic results. 43% increase in average income, 60% reduction in business failures." A young woman entered the community center, her travel-stained dress and nervous expression marking her as someone seeking help. She approached Evelyn's desk with the same hesitant steps Evelyn had taken 6 months earlier. Buck noticed the visitor immediately and moved to welcome her. "Good afternoon, miss. How can we help you today?" The contrast with his earlier behavior was stark. The woman visibly relaxed at his warm greeting, a response that would have been impossible during Webb's era. "I'm looking for Mrs. Hawk. They told me in Riverside that she helps people with legal troubles." Evelyn stood and extended her hand. "I'm Evelyn Hawk. Please, sit down and tell me what's happening." The young woman introduced herself as Sarah Chen, Ruby's cousin from a mining town 50 miles north. Her community faced the same pattern of corruption and exploitation that had nearly destroyed Cedar Ridge. Ruby appeared at the top of the stairs, having heard her cousin's name. She descended quickly, embrace warming the formal atmosphere of the legal office. "Sarah, what brings you so far from home? Our town council is forcing out families who don't fit their vision of progress." Sound familiar? Evelyn and Levi exchanged knowing glances. Word of their success had spread throughout the territory, drawing people from communities facing similar challenges. Buck brought Sarah a cup of coffee without being asked. "Take your time, miss. Mrs. Hawk helped all of us when we needed it most." Sarah explained her town situation over the next hour. Excessive taxes targeting specific businesses, property seizures justified by questionable safety inspections, a railroad company purchasing land at below-market prices through forced sales. Evelyn took detailed notes, recognizing the familiar pattern of systematic corruption. "How many families have been affected?" "Nearly half the town. The ones who are left are too scared to speak up." Ruby leaned forward intently. "What about the local marshal? The territorial representatives? All appointed by the same people profiting from the land sales." Levi began sketching organizational charts on a piece of paper, mapping out the power structure Sarah described. His experience with cooperative formation had taught him to identify key leverage points in corrupt systems. Evelyn opened her file cabinet and withdrew a thick folder marked Template Documents. Inside were legal forms, federal contact information, and step-by-step procedures for exposing territorial corruption. "We've helped 4 other communities establish cooperative businesses and remove corrupt officials. The process takes time, but it works." Buck cleared the coffee cups as afternoon clients began arriving for their appointments. A seamstress seeking partnership advice. 2 farmers wanting to establish a grain collective. The former hotel owner planning to reopen under worker ownership. Each person greeted Evelyn with respect and Buck with genuine warmth. The community had healed from Webb's divisive policies, replacing fear-based hierarchy with cooperative mutual aid. Sarah watched the interactions with growing hope. "You really changed everything here, didn't you?" Ruby smiled proudly. "We changed everything together. Evelyn and Levi showed us what was possible, but we had to choose to make it real." As evening approached, Evelyn packed her legal materials while Buck secured the community center for the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more people seeking justice, additional cooperative businesses requiring legal structure. Sarah accepted Ruby's invitation to stay overnight before beginning her journey home. She carried copies of legal documents, federal contact information, and most importantly, proof that corrupt systems could be transformed through law, organization, and collective action. Levi and Evelyn walked home together as lamplight began flickering in windows throughout Cedar Ridge. The town had become a model for territorial development, proving that inclusion and cooperation created more prosperity than exclusion and exploitation. Their success had attracted federal attention, railroad company lawsuits, and political pressure from officials in other communities who profited from similar corruption. But it had also attracted people like Sarah, carrying hope back to places where hope had nearly died. The transformation was complete, but the work continued.